Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
With the first pick, the Detroit Pistons select Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State University.
Chandler again. Oh, what a block by Maxfield! My goodness!
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
There's Jaden playing the passing lane. Skies a jam. Dynamite dunk, and the crowd loves it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing. Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano. Joining me at 11:02 Eastern Standard Time on NBA Draft Night are my co-hosts, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, Pistons had the 5th pick. They recently made a trade to move up to 25, and it's pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited coming out of this draft. There's still a couple more moves that they could make, but how are you guys feeling?
Not to go on a rant. I won't go on a rant. It's too late at night to go on a rant. But the NBA draft, it takes too long. I'll be the old man yelling here. It's ridiculous how long the draft takes, that it's 11 o'clock. The draft started 3 hours ago, and the first round is not even completed yet. This is ridiculous. If it's going to take this long, make it a 2-night event like you're the NFL. I mean, this is just insane. But other than that, I'm doing good and ready to talk about the draft.
Yeah, you guys, it's 11:03, but you guys have real jobs, and I work at restaurants. So for me, this is like, I don't know, middle of the afternoon. Like, it's 4:30 right now for me. So I'm feeling great. I'm ready to talk about what I think has been a very exciting draft for the Detroit Pistons, which, like you said, is not quite over yet. So there might be 1 or 2 moves still coming down the pipe. If they happen while we're recording, we will absolutely talk about them. If they happen afterwards, so be it. But the 2 picks that the Pistons have made in the first round, one of them via trade, definitely give us more than enough to talk about on this edition of the podcast. Very exciting draft. I don't know if the Pistons have had the best draft. There's been a couple teams with drafts that have been better, but I have to say I'm personally pretty happy with where they're sitting right now.
And we are no strangers to late breaking news. I believe Aaron and I recorded the podcast 2.5 hours before Monty Williams was hired. So
yeah, and we probably still have another. We still probably have another 2.5 hours before this draft ends. So
very, very possible. Very possible. Before we get into our discussion of the draft, I want to thank our sponsor for this week's podcast, and that is BetOnline. And BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head on over to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today. Get in on the action and use our promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's BLEAV for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using BetOnline. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, moving right into it. The Pistons picked 5th overall. The odds were going insane, just like they did last year with Paolo Banchero and Jabari Smith. But turns out the Pistons sort of held true with who they were going to pick. And with the 5th overall selection, they did select Ausar Thompson from the Overtime Elite. His brother went just one slot before to the Houston Rockets, which just stokes the Pistons, the odd Pistons-Rockets rivalry even more. But the Pistons got a Thompson twin, which if you told me that heading into this season, I would have been pleasantly happy with that. I think he adds a level of athleticism and defensive instinct that is going to become immediately apparent with this team. I think he's going to mesh in extraordinarily well with the rest of the young core. I'm very happy with this pick, and I'm glad that we didn't get something off the wall from Troy Weaver and company. This is a pretty solid pick. Everybody seems in the NBA Twitter sphere agreed with that as well. That this plus Cade Cunningham plus Jaden Ivey getting downhill, plus Jalen Duren being an elite rim protector and smart passer just creates a perfect vortex of youth and athleticism. And plus seeing Cade sort of kind of galvanize all that together will be really interesting. But guys, I'm going to kick it over to you. Jasper, what was your initial reaction with the drafting of Ausar Thompson, 5th overall to the Detroit Pistons?
Extremely happy. I've been on the record as saying I think that the Thompson twins, of all the players that were a reasonable option for them at 5, as I think we all anticipated Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, and Brandon Miller all being off the board by the time the Rockets were picking. So of all the players that were potentially going to be there for Detroit, I thought the Thompson twins had the highest upside, and I'm extremely happy that they went with Ausar, especially because Amon was off the board there. That would have been extremely interesting if he was still on the board, if the Rockets had gone another direction, but we're past that now. I totally agree with what you're saying here, Mike. Absolutely. The things that Ausar Thompson is going to bring day one, he's going to bring athleticism, he's going to bring slashing, he's going to bring a level of, tertiary playmaking next to Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, and he's going to bring what I think is probably going to be elite, potentially all defensive team level defense. Maybe not day one, but very, very quickly as he acclimates to the league. I want to address some of the concerns that I've seen, fans, analysts throw out there in regards to his shooting. It's absolutely something to be at least a little worried about. And of course the level of competition that he and Amon faced this last year. But the fact of the matter is, he is 6'7". He is an incredible athlete. One of the things that translates more than anything else across levels of basketball, way more than offense, is defense, because so much of it comes down to effort. And the fact of the matter is, Ausar Thompson is going to give you 100% effort every single night. He's an extraordinarily hard worker. And in regards to people who are concerned about his shot, that is a perfect example of how hard of a worker he is. If you look at how he was shooting in workouts towards the end of the year with Overtime Elite, his shot form was much better. And especially in the mid-range, you could see it coming around very, very quickly for him. So yes, I do think that there are concerns about the shooting, but he's been working with an NBA distance three-point line. I don't think that you can understate how important that is to development. He's made improvements, and the things that he does well already are things that you can instantly see translating to the NBA. I've seen people questioning whether he will be a starter day one. I think that a lot of that comes down to what the Pistons do in free agency. If they spend big money on someone like Cam Johnson or Jeremy Grant, it's hard to imagine that they won't be a starter next to Bojan Bogdanovic. So there is a possibility that he comes off of the bench, but if he does, that's also fine, as he's not going to have Bojan Bogdanovic in front of him for all that long, and either Cam or Jeremy Grant could conceivably move to power forward. So I'm very happy with this pick. I think they took the highest upside player available. I think they picked a player who immediately fits into what they need in terms of athleticism, in terms of wing defense. God, we have been saying it forever. This is just the type of player that they need. And since I'm assuming Troy Weaver and co. believe in him being able to improve that shot, if he can, he doesn't have to be an elite shooter. He just has to be a 35% kind of shooter in order to be an unbelievably dangerous weapon on both ends of the floor for Detroit. I'm very happy with the pick.
Yeah, I think,
Aaron,
when you look at who is available, the draft was playing out as you had expected it to, and Ausar Thompson, although he wasn't my first choice personally, is still a very good prospect to come away with for Detroit, all things considered. They didn't want to be in this position. They didn't want to be drafting 5. It was worst case scenario. But for them to come out of the draft at 5 with an elite defensive prospect who has elite athleticism, budding playmaking skills, good size, like these are all great qualities and address needs for Detroit. And again, even though he wasn't my top choice, I still think that this was a good pick for the Pistons. For me, like everyone else, the biggest question mark is his ability to space the floor, is his ability to knock down outside shots. And, for a team that doesn't have a lot of shooting, in its projected starting group, it's a major concern for me. But the other qualities that he has are so strong, and the way that he just pops out on tape with how fast he is, with how athletic he is, the defensive intangibles that he has. I mean, there is so much to like about him there. You're just not going to be able to find a prospect that is great at everything, especially at 5, especially in a draft that isn't considered to be some super elite class. Every player that they could have taken at 5 was going to have a flaw that stood out in their game. And for Thompson, it's shooting. It's how he fits in a half-court setting on offense. But again, every prospect was going to have an issue that was going to be worrisome. I'll say, for example, Taylor Hendricks, the guy that I was my ideal target for Detroit at 5. Some of the biggest concerns around his game were what was his ability, to generate offense outside of being a shooter going to look like. There were some concerns about that. So every player that Detroit could have taken was going to have some major question marks. It just so happens that Thompson's is shooting, which is a big issue for this Detroit team. This conversation doesn't have to get super philosophical in terms of how this team is constructed right now. The rest of the offseason still has to take place. There's going to be free agency. It would not shock me if Detroit's at least involved in trade talks. It's something that Troy Weaver likes to find himself in. But Ausar Thompson, I think, is a good pick. Not necessarily a guy that I spent a ton of time watching, because it wasn't a guy that piqued my interest the most throughout the process. But from what I did see and what I did read, it's very clear why the Pistons liked him, and it's very clear that he is going to help them in some key areas. I mean, this was a terrible defensive team last season, and he is an elite defensive prospect with the way he can get in passing lanes, with his ability to stay in front of guys, guard multiple positions. He's going to make such a huge impact on that side of the floor, and for a team that desperately needs to get better on that end. It's super exciting. The athleticism, again, off the charts with him. So I like the pick for Detroit. And as they continue to build out their draft, and now they have to build out the rest of the roster, I think this was an upside play. And with this hopefully being the last year that Detroit's picking in the top 5, top 10, whatever, if you want to take one last swing for the fences on a guy that has that all-star level potential, I think you have to live with it. And then that's what they did with Ausar Thompson.
I think you bring up a good point there, Aaron, in that, yeah, after Victor, even with Victor, like every prospect in this range from 1 to the end of the draft has one red flag or another. And I see a lot of people kind of harping on the lack of shooting from Ausar, but look, the number 2 pick in the draft was Brandon Miller. That guy has the biggest red flag I've seen of any prospect in this draft. Of course, I'm referring to him calling Paul George the GOAT. For me, that is terrifying. So when I look at somebody like Ausar Thompson or the other players that were potentially available there, like Anthony Black has red flags. Jarris Walker has red flags. Taylor Hendricks has red flags. And those aren't players with nearly the same amount of upside. Talk about red flags. Cam Whitmore was a very heavily talked about player to the Pistons with the 5th pick. He slid all the way to 20. So, that's just something that you have to live with in a draft like this without a bunch of surefire, top-end prospects. Everyone's going to have red flags. You have to live with the red flags that are there, hope that you can get past them. and build on the good things that are within that player. I want to quickly, before we move on, just mention a little quote that Amari Sankofa of the Detroit Free Press wrote about Ausar Thompson, saying, Ausar said on his game fitting with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, I can see it going in a way where there are 3 guys who can facilitate. 3 guys who can come off screens, kind of like a shy, giddy Jalen Williams type of thing. Back cut. That's what the NBA is going to. That to me is so telling about the level of basketball IQ that Ausar Thompson has, his willingness to accept a role that's given to him, his ability to see ahead, to see where the game is going, and to anticipate his role. He's not somebody who's coming in saying, yeah, it's my team now. No, he's saying, this is how I can work with these players, and looking not just where he fits in with the team now, but where he fits in down the road. I think to me that shows such a level of maturity, and we know those are the type of players that Troy Weaver is automatically going to gravitate to. I think this is actually a good time to, talk about their second pick, because Marcus Sasser is another player who absolutely fits the mold of the type of guy that Troy Weaver is going for in this draft, doesn't
he? Certainly does. And that's a good segue. So after a trade with the Boston Celtics, the Pistons were awarded the 25th pick. They selected Marcus Sasser out of Houston. He averaged 16.8 points, 3.1 assists per game. Houston was very good last year. They locked up the number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. He is a 22-year-old. He's a very good perimeter defender. I think the experience is helpful. He's a good three-point shooter, catch and shoot threes, off the dribble threes. He had a junior year where he shot 44% from deep. That was, I think he only played in 10 or 11 games that year, but 44% from long range on almost 9 attempts per game. Definitely fits the mold. A hard-nosed point guard, going to find his shot, but a tough defender. Before we talk about the ramifications of the addition of Marcus Sasser to this roster and how that's going to crunch the guards even more, I think this is a great pick as well. I think we talked about Marcus Sasser in one of our pre-draft podcasts as a good second-round guy. They moved up to get him, and that's fine. I think at this point in the draft, going and moving to get who you want to get, with how weird this draft has gone, I don't have any problem with that. Go and get your man. If you want a Marcus Sasser and you don't think he's going to be there at 26 or 7, then trade a couple seconds and make it work. But I do like this pick a lot. It doesn't exactly solve the rim pressure out of the guards, but you already have enough guards that can do that. So I don't think it's too big of a problem. You're not relying on him to do that. You're relying on a guy to play perimeter defense and to make shots and be willing to take shots, particularly from deep. So I think Marcus Sasser fits exactly what the Pistons are looking for. Definitely what Troy Weaver is looking for, a tough-nosed defender. Jasper, what do you think about this pick?
I like this pick too. Look, do I think that there were higher upside guys potentially available to them at 25, even potentially 31? I mean, who's to say? Sasser easily could have fallen to 31 for Detroit, but really all they gave up to move back into the first round was that 31st overall pick and a couple of future seconds. And we've discussed this on the podcast before. We were discussing it even before we started this podcast. Those picks don't mean anything to me. If anything over the past few years has proven to us, especially to the Pistons, you can trade away and regain second rounders like they were nothing in this league right now. That's not to say those picks don't still have value once they convert into players, but as picks themselves, they really don't matter. I think the ramifications here for somebody like Killian Hayes are, they definitely are there. This is the type of guy that
is officially warm.
Yeah, it's more than warm. You know how like you put a frog in a thing of water and then you turn on the heat and they don't notice it. If you put them in the hot water, they notice it immediately. If you start turning up the heat, they don't notice it. Well, Killian Hayes just got thrown in a boiling hot pot of water. He should be freaking out a little bit right now. Marcus Sasser, of course, the issue here is that he's 6'1", 6'2", and that is definitely a problem in the modern NBA. I mean, that's just an undersized guard. But like you said, really good defender. This is a guy that over the last 3 years averages over a steal and a half per game. Over the last 3 years, shot 7.6 threes per game on 37% efficiency. We're talking about a player who shot almost 750 threes in his NCAA career at a 37% clip. Efficiency is not an issue. Willingness to shoot is not an issue. And especially when you bring in that hard-nosed defense, that's really what Killian Hayes brings to you right now. So I definitely would be a little worried. The thing with Sasser is, like, I don't know if he's a 2. I think he's just too undersized there. Can he play the 1? I don't know. He's not really a high assist guy. But if you put him next to somebody like Alec Burks, who can pressure the rim, who can get to the free throw line, and can pass a little bit, well, maybe you can have enough playmaking there. And if you sign somebody in free agency to be your starting wing next to Bojan Bogdanovic, maybe you bring Ausar Thompson off the bench as kind of a secondary playmaker, and you kind of just get by with all 3 of those guys coming off your bench your first year in terms of playmaking. I think that could definitely work, especially when you take into account Sasser's ability to shoot from distance at a high clip and Ausar's inability to do so. You could probably cover up some of those holes there. So for me, I think, I don't really think it costs you anything of note to move up in the draft. Sorry, I don't value those second round picks. I know some people do. And while I do think that there are definite question marks regarding Sasser's size, there are none regarding his tenacity, especially on defense. There are very few regarding his shooting. And for a team that people who were criticizing the selection of Ausar Thompson with the 5th pick, saying they need shooting, well, here's your shooting. And you get another good defender. So for a team that was the 2nd worst defensive team in the NBA last year, I think that these are 2 really good pickups that fit to what they really, really need right now.
I'm not quite sure what the qualms were with trading up for the pick. These future second round picks are a dime a dozen. It's not something that Troy Weaver hasn't done before. He moves second round picks every year, every single draft he does it. And if you want a second round pick next year or in 2 years or in 3 years, whenever these second round picks that he traded come into play, you just move a couple more down the line. It's just a revolving door. It's not hard to get pick 38, pick 39, pick 42. It's like it doesn't mean anything. All you have to do is continuously trade future second round picks. You can just do it every single year. It really doesn't matter. If you're convinced on a guy, you want to make sure you can get him, you do it. Sasser, like Ausar Thompson, wasn't like the number 1 guy on my board for them with their 2nd pick, but he does a lot of good things and is going to help the Pistons. A great shooter, can score off the dribble and as a spot up guy, gives them a defensive minded guard, an absolute dog on the defensive end, is something that they needed. And I'm just not going to get up in arms over them moving a couple future second round picks that we don't know if they have protections on them yet, and B, you're going to be able to get second round picks whenever you want to. They're not hard to acquire. We are seeing trades on draft night here tonight where teams are trading some cash for a second round pick. Like, if you really want a second round pick, you can go and get it. So
the Boston Celtics have continuously traded back and back and back, and they're just acquiring second round picks like it's nothing.
It's just it's easy to do.
It's easy. You can buy your way back in.
It addresses shooting. It addresses defense. It gives them another option to look at in terms of moving away from Killian Hayes, which I think is the right thing to do. I think it's just at that point in time. I don't know if it happens day one, but I also can see the Pistons going and getting another veteran guard in free agency, which makes it even harder for Killian Hayes to have a future here. So I like the pick. There were some other guys that I was certainly interested in. Julian Strawther out of Gonzaga was a guy that I really, really liked, and a guy that I was hoping would be there at 31. He ended up going 29. So sometimes if there's a guy that you like, you have to pay that price. If you really want him, you have to pay that price to jump up and get him. And Troy wanted that in Sasser. You have to trust that he knows what he's doing. And by all means, I mean, what are the knocks on Sasser besides he's going to be a 23-year-old rookie? Like, yes, he's a little bit short, but he's going to be a backup point guard, a backup guard. And again, he's 23. Like, if that's the worst con out of a late first round pick, so be it. I think he could do a lot worse. This is a guy that's going to come in and help. And as Jasper, you mentioned, he's kind of on the the opposite side of the spectrum with Thompson, who's a big athlete, who's just a bigger defensive minded guy, but can't really shoot. Sasser's smaller, not necessarily a big time athlete, but shoots the crap out of the ball, is a big time scorer. So little yin and yang there. I like this pick by Detroit. And again, I think they needed to figure out some backup guard depth, and I think this helps with that. And it's defensive minded. This team had to get better defensively this offseason. Thompson and Sasser, two guys that are going to certainly impact them in a positive way on the defensive end. And I'm sure that that's something that Monty Williams was big on in any sort of like shared with Troy Weaver and Tom Gores throughout the hiring process of getting this team to be not bottom of the barrel defensively, giving up 130 points every night.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing here, because I see a lot of talk about the Pistons shooting and how Ausar doesn't fix that. But look, the fact of the matter is the Pistons were the 22nd best. I shouldn't say best. They were 22nd in the league in 3-point shooting last year at 35.1%. But the difference between them being 22nd and being 13th in the league was 1.4%. That's not a huge leap. Especially if you come back next year and Cade Cunningham can be a good shooter and Jaden Ivey takes a step forward in terms of his shooting. But the difference between them being the 27th ranked defense at 117.8 points per 100 and being the 13th best defense was 4.6 points per 100. So the difference in those two things, they have so much more work to make up for what they lack on the defensive end than they do in terms of 3-point shooting. And the fact of the matter is, shooters they're not as hard to find in today's NBA as they were even 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's way easier to find guys who can elevate your 3-point shooting percentage, based on whatever. It's way harder to find elite defensive wings. I mean, look, Mikal Bridges did not have anything close to the offensive explosion he had with the Nets before he went to the Nets. And yet, he was the centerpiece of the return for Kevin Durant. Why do you think that is? It's because he's an elite defensive wing who has offensive upside. And now you're seeing it with the Nets. So for me, I just think that people are looking at this all wrong, where they're saying you need the shooting. No, you need the defense way worse. And I think that Detroit did a great job in dealing with that primarily, and also picking up shooting, also having a backup plan for if Killian Hayes doesn't work out this season. I think it was a very, very good draft. I wouldn't call it an A+ draft. They didn't necessarily get all the guys that I wanted the most with that second pick, but I think this is I have very few complaints. This is a solid B+ A- kind of draft to me.
Yeah, I agree. They solved two of the key problems that existed on their roster, which was defense, and I guess I'd say athleticism, but you could probably say playmaking, but it's hard to say playmaking without Cade out there as well. But they solved the athleticism and they solved the defense in two separate ways. And it didn't cost them, like Aaron said, it doesn't cost you a whole lot with some second round picks to move up to get your guy. So I agree. I think this was a good draft. It's been a very strange draft. Leonard Miller just went. He was a first round grade. Cam Whitmore fell a ton. Not nearly as much movement on the trade market as we thought that we were going to get. Still plenty of off season to go, but all things considered, I think it was a very good draft for the Pistons.
I hope NBA GMs are happy. Mike is starving to death. He has not eaten any slop today, and he's
Nothing.
skin and bone.
I am starved and parched at the same time. I'm seeing mirages of restaurants and delicious pools of clear water. Haven't had nothing. I mean, even Mark Stein went on his podcast and said, I don't want to jinx it, but he expects a lot of moves ahead of the draft. And he lied. Mark Stein lied to us.
The second it's the true for the NBA draft as it is for like NFL trade deadline. Whenever they say, I got a feeling we're going to see a lot of movement this year, you're not going to see anything. It's like worse than the announcer curse for, extra points or field goals.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But overall, good draft, fellas. Agreed?
Agreed. I mean, I don't think it was perfect, but I think it was good. I think they addressed some areas of need. And just because I think the Pistons should have taken Taylor Hendricks or Cam Whitmore or whoever, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's Troy was going to make his picks. Troy we were hearing more and more that Ausar Thompson was becoming the guy. So this is something that we had some time to prepare for. And I like I said, I think both these guys are going to help Detroit a lot. So I'm satisfied with the draft. I think they're two good prospects, and the Pistons got better today. That's the important thing. They got better. They got good players. So excited to see what they're going to be able to do. And it makes me start to think about my favorite time of the year, Summer League. A few weeks away.
Right.
Oh my God. Oh Jesus. How did I forget? Mike with his slop and Aaron with his Summer League. I need an S thing too. I don't know.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out. Yeah, I'm with you. Look, we said it in the weeks leading up to this draft. The Pistons got dealt a really, really bad hand getting the 5th pick. It put them in a position where it was much harder to make trades with teams that were interested in moving up for an elite talent. It made things a lot harder in terms of getting a guy that you feel is much closer to a surefire prospect in terms of, say, Scoot Henderson or Victor Wembanyama. But all things considered, I think they did the best they possibly could have. They went out and got their guy in Marcus Sasser. They took the player that I think is the highest upside in Ausar Thompson. I'm with you, Aaron. I would have also been very cool with them taking Jarris Walker. I would have been cool with them taking Taylor Hendricks. This wasn't the only pick, but I think it was a good pick. And it was the highest upside pick. And I can't fault Troy Weaver for doing that. Does Ausar Thompson have bust potential? Absolutely. This is not me saying that, like, this was the perfect pick and it's going to work out amazingly and everybody who has doubts about it is an idiot. No way. But considering the hand that they were dealt, I think they came out of this having addressed most of their needs and also having gotten the most talented player available at number 5. So I don't really have any complaints. And yeah, whether it works out or not, I can't fault the process on draft night. So I think it was a very, very good draft for Detroit. Like you said, Aaron, not perfect, but very good.
And we'll take very good. After getting dealt the 5th pick, the Pistons will take very good. And I think it's unanimous for us three that we feel did a pretty good job. And with still plenty of off-season still to go, I'm sure the slot bucket will be full. I wouldn't be surprised if it's full when I wake up in the morning and check my phone. But we hope you'll join us for
Mike checking his texts while he just eats out of a trough.
Just to see if it's full. Well, we hope that all of you listeners will join us as we cover the NBA offseason, one of the most exciting times, certainly one of my most favorite times in sports has turned into free agency and trade frenzy. And we hope that you will join us, and we'll have plenty more covering the draft for Detroit, covering Ausar Thompson, how he fits, and Marcus Sasser and how he fits, and what this is going to mean for the roster moving forward. I mean, this is a roster crunch with a lot of young guys, and decisions are going to have to be made. And we hope that you'll join us for all of that as well. So thank you for listening to this shortened edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast this week. We wanted to get something out quickly following the draft. And like I said, we'll have a lot more coverage heading into the next couple of weeks, because the Pistons are most definitely not done with their offseason. And we hope that you'll be joining us to hear all about it. So for my co-hosts, Jasper Apollonia and Aaron Johnson, I am Mike Anguilano. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Palace of Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network. And we will see you all next time.